These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Times. I'm your host, Richard Gordon. Thank you for joining us. You know, it seems that every day there's a disaster, there's a catastrophe, there's something that happens in the world that totally preoccupies our time and our attention. It's become part of our lives. It's become part of what we do. How we deal with it, how we fight against it, how we recover from it, how we try to prevent it. How do we keep it from happening again? That's the subject of today's show. Today, we're going to talk to someone who really knows about this, a true expert in disasters, someone who I've known for quite some time. And frankly, you can't turn on the TV, you can't read a magazine, you can't go anywhere without seeing our guest, Juliette Kayyem. She has become the disaster expert. I like to refer to her as the queen of disasters, but that's another story. Juliette Kayyem was the Assistant Secretary to Homeland Security, is a professor at Harvard, author of an incredible book on living in the age of disasters, which I think is there. And I recommend you read this. This is a damn good book. This is a really good book. It's a great read. It's an easy read in the sense of she's so conversational. So I recommend it to all of you to read it. She's a frequent commentator on CNN and a bunch of other places. And she's the founder of Kayyem Solutions, which is a truly innovative consulting firm which helps governments, companies, educational facilities prepare for disaster. So, Juliette, welcome to Unconventional Times.
Nice to be here. We're often close, but not close right now. But thank you so much for the kind introduction too. I like to say about the Devil Never Sleeps is that it is in fact an evergreen book. Like, you know, it is unfortunately it never sleeps.
I'm going to talk about the book specifically in a minute, but it came out a couple of years ago. Yeah. But I find it could have come out yesterday.
Yeah, that's that, and it keeps coming out in the sense that it is. Well, we're going to talk bookshop, but you know, books come out and you either hit or don't hit. I'm being very honest here. My book came out the week Russia invaded Ukraine. And so it was very hard to get oxygen for a non-war book. And I was, you get frustrated, you work on these things a long time. And then my wonderful agent, Sarah Burns, said, just keep plugging along, whatever. And it keeps plugging along. Like, you may not have that opening that you wanted, but it is part of, classes and corporate education and a lot of my speeches and certainly the way I hope, people are thinking about disaster management, because certainly the current events give us plenty of material.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think you're ever going to go out of business.
I'd like to.
Yeah. But the thing that I found about it is just how interesting a read it was. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, look what happened here. This is so horrible and awful, and this many people died, etc. It was much more like, how do we deal with this? What could we have done? And how do we think about these things going forward? And that's why I found it very interesting. That's why I really enjoyed it. And I do recommend it because it is so interesting. And, this isn't really where I thought we were going to start, but that's fine. I think the reason it's so important for people to read is because, and you say this in the book in a different way. I'm trying to remember how you said it, but it's something like, we're all in this. It doesn't matter if you're
you are here.
a climatologist or whatever, or a parent or whatever you are, you're involved in disaster management.
And you are here is the constant refrain. You are here. Like, in other words, get your mind around this. So it is, I will, well, thank you. First of all, I do have a line in the book where I said, I'm trying to relate this in a way that doesn't make people either tune out or freak out. Like, I was trying to find that middle lane, because you can talk in a certain way where people are like, oh my God, we're going to hell in a handbasket, or I can't deal. So part of the book's way of presenting these things is to try to be conversational for a reason, because I want to give people agency, which I think is important, because I think we can feel like we don't have agency over all of these difficult issues, and so I do try to ground it, and that is the goal.
Juliette, if not, we would not get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah,
Because, every day, look, this is probably a really bad thing I do, but every morning, literally before I
Don't
brush
do
my
it.
teeth,
Don't do
I
it.
I
You
read.
scroll. Don't do it. Don't
I read
do
about
it.
and it's always a disaster. There's
Yeah,
always a
yeah,
shooting or a flood or a tornado. There are people
yeah.
dying, and it's awful. So let me just go back a little bit. Um, Seriously, how did you become the head of this? I mean, how did this even happen?
I know it's I mean, it's so horrible to say, because and it's not like I'm humble or anything. It is, some people's careers are amplified by bad things happening, and I've always um struggled with that as a writer, as an analyst, as honestly as someone whose professional career and salary are dependent on bad things happening. And so I try to not, uh, um, sort of try to create more hysteria than there is, sort of realizing like this is just bad stuff. I on the sort of resume side, I started off in as a lawyer and ultimately ended up in counterterrorism, but that was before 9/11.
Right.
Fast forward very quickly, I was serving on the National Commission on Terrorism, which was one of those congressional commissions before September 11th, 25 years ago, sort of warning of the threat. 9/11 happens and my career shifts. Very few people in terrorism or counterterrorism, but I talk often about the course correction, my own career. We all have them. It is, for 2001 to 2005 in academia and media and policy work, I'm focused. Our entire apparatus is focused on 19 guys, stopping 19 guys from getting on 4 airplanes.
Right.
And then 2005 happens, and that's Hurricane Katrina, when I realized we can't just focus on prevention. We have to get better at disaster management. I had a bunch of government stints in state government and federal government, academia, corporate work, but basically around the same thing, which was risk reduction and also managing what I call right side of the boom after something bad happens.
Right.
Different pieces of it formed for different reasons. CNN and the writing part. It's important to me to have a voice in this space, and I hope it's a helpful one. CNN, I became affiliated with them during the Boston Marathon, and sort of have kept a relationship with them for a long time. So it's been different, and now I do a lot of mega event planning in my corporate world because of sports events and other high profile events and other kinds of advising. So it's been and I'm a professor at the Kennedy School. So it's been a combination of different things. I like to say about a career like mine is, some days I have no bosses and other days I have 100. As I said to you before we went on, right after this, I have a CNN hit and or business call and then a CNN hit. But that's basically it. I describe myself as, I've and students as they start to think about their career. I have had one career, but many jobs. And that's how I describe myself, right? I've had one career in terms of preparation, getting ready, bad things happening, failing safer is the terminology I use in the book, learning to fail safer. And that has taken different pieces.
Do your kids find you too gloom and doomy because you have to spend so much
No,
time on
I'm
this?
obviously like
Because you're
I'm
not like that as a person. I
no,
mean,
I'm
you and I have
not.
been
And
friends for a
I think that's
long
important. I
time.
mean, I think, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I think it's important, as I said, to give people agency, because I think, and we do have agency and there are solutions. And the book is a lot about, I look at disasters, but I look at a lot of disaster management that went right, and to learn from that and to
Right.
learn from those issues. But no, I mean, my kids care about my work as much as any kids care about their parents' work. Like, it's like, they're like, what do you do? Like during COVID, CNN set up a studio in my house. We have another house in Rhode Island where I'm now, when I have one upstairs here. And I'm literally like, oh, like, 4 feet from the big TV room. And I'll be, I'll get up, I'll say, oh, I got to go, on air, and I'll do my makeup, whatever, get off. And I come out and I was like, how'd I do, guys? And it's like, they're watching ESPN. And I was like,
Of
thank you.
course.
Thank you. So
Yeah. Wait, so is this the old creaky house in the book?
yes, I open with that. Should I tell the story, or the story? I'll say it very quick because it takes 6 pages to do it. But basically, the trigger for this book, there are two triggers for
I
this
was going
book.
to ask you the inspiration for the book.
Yeah, I mean, there's two. There's one that was lingering, um, but the one that sort of thought this is the opening of a new book was learning during COVID that the house I live in Cambridge, which I call, as you said, old and cranky, 100 years almost to the date, had been the residence of the McHugh family. I found a picture in a crawl space of the father McHugh, and people hunted it down for me on Twitter. Fast forward, it just learned that the McHugh family had lived there, and their 19-year-old daughter, had died in the Spanish flu 100 years before. They had closed up this crawl space that then gets exposed during my stint in the house because of wear and tear, and that connectivity was what brought that sort of, I need to find the through lines. I need to find the connective tissue, because if you look at each disaster differently, you're not going to take away what my book is, which is essentially 8 sort of important lessons. The second trigger had come years before, which is the title of the book. I had met a wonderful woman.
This is Jane Cage?
Yeah, Jane Cage,
Right.
Joplin, Missouri. And you remember, she was part of the recovery effort for a community, very devout, very conservative community that had found that had lost over 100 people in a tornado. Tornadoes are horrific that way. And she was very optimistic and very faith-based. And I asked her, a lot of people sort of say, oh, this is what's God's way, or God has his mysterious ways. I said, how are you like this? And she spoke about her faith being about agency. And she said, the devil never sleeps, meaning there'll be more tornadoes in Missouri. The devil never sleeps, but he only wins if we don't do better next time. And I thought that's the vision that we need, that I think that needs to guide us. The book is more policy and wonky in some instances in terms of looking at disaster management, but I try to do it through, I don't know, what is it, a couple dozen stories of how
Examples,
disasters
yeah.
really unfolded, rather than the bad thing happened and that's it, like how they actually unfolded, because there are pivot points that matter.
Yeah, I think the message of the book, at least to me, is that there will be disasters. It's
Yeah,
inevitable,
yeah,
but it's how we deal with it, how we prepare for it,
yeah,
what we do after, how do we make it not so bad?
yeah,
Is
not bad. Less bad is my
I like
quantitative
less
model. Yeah,
bad.
yeah,
I
and
like less bad.
failing safer. It's funny, we talked about books and writing, and whenever I write a book, it's impossible to reread. But when you think about sort of, if I were to rewrite it or restructure it, there's a way I frame it in class that I don't quite know why I didn't write it this way, but because I teach in this, as I teach people who will be in this space. But what we have to think of as society is sort of the crash landing is coming. We would like it not to come, but the crash landing is coming. So you have only two options. One is be ready for it, or extend your runway, right? Because the runway is short. In any crisis, your ability to react is going to be truncated in time, and those early decisions matter a lot. And I think about that a lot in terms of just the runway, right? The runway is short, and we can be less bad because the crash landing is happening. Things can be less bad if we anticipate it and buy ourselves some time. And I use this in my personal life. I mean, I think always, like, a bad thing delayed a day is a good day, right? Or
But it's not kick the can down the road. It's
no,
it's
it
how do
is
we
that,
improve in order, right?
right. And it's also thinking about it in terms of, because time will give you more options, right? I mean, in other words, if you're pressed up against a wall, it's going to be very hard to make decisions. So think about, going to current events, but like think about the flooding in Texas, excuse me. Why are people like me focused on situational awareness and early alert systems? Is because it buys people time. right?
Right.
I mean, those girls, we're learning now, those girls in the lowest cabin who passed away, if they had had 4 minutes from some, let's say if there had been an early alert system, all it would have taken was 4 minutes up a walkway to get to an area where most of the other campers were protected. And so I think
I want to
about
get to
time.
I want to get to Texas specifically because I think
Yeah.
it's a very
Uh,
important. It's very
it's been rough for me. I mean, I don't know if you've seen or I got trolled by the official DHS X feed. I mean, that has never happened before.
uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, can't be too critical these days.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
You do say in the book that we focus on the past and the future, but not the present. Now, I think you might have been
Yeah.
talking about my life personally,
Yeah.
but let's skip that for a moment. But what do you mean? What do you mean about talking about the past and the future, but not the present?
Well, I mean, I actually sort of forget that part, but I think what maybe the best thing is to talk about the first chapter in the sense of positioning ourselves in this moment as if the bad thing will happen. Like it's not going to happen. It didn't just happen once in the past, and it's not going to happen in the future. So, assume the boom, right? Boom is, I use different words for bad things happening, devil
Sure.
in the book. But I talk about left of boom being prevention, protection. You wish things bad wouldn't happen. The boom, I'm agnostic about. I
It
used
is
to
what
be.
it is. It happens.
I used to be in counterterrorism. I'm
Yeah.
not there anymore. I'm an all hazards person. So I'm going to be generic about the boom because the
Right.
lessons of disaster management are more similar than we would allow them to be if we look at each different disaster separately. But that system is also under stress given the recurring nature of disasters, given the politics and misinformation in the world today.
It's interesting. There's so many quotes in the book that I love that I
Oh,
reread because I found them really interesting.
oh, that's so nice.
Um, an acceptance that prevention will fail
Yeah,
is interesting.
yeah.
An infinite loop
But
of
it's Yeah,
destruction.
but it's not fatalistic. I'm very careful about that when I talk about things. I mean, it's sorry, I got something in my eye. We're gonna edit. We don't even have to edit that out. We're live. That happens. But
Exactly.
um, I don't. I you couldn't. I'm not fatalistic. I'm
Yeah.
not. Well, one is I'm statistical, right? Like, I mean, data driven. I'm gonna see these things coming, but more that I believe that it's optimistic to assume acute moments. Like in other word, because it gives you agency that you're not just some passive observer to bad things
Right.
happening, right? I think I mentioned in the book that the word disaster, when you think about it, is which I had not before, not
Right.
an aster, the stars, right? It's a misalignment of the stars, star-crossed lovers.
And you do the same thing with catastrophe, I remember.
Catastrophe has the same. And when you think about it, it sort of leads us astray because it puts us in a passive position. And I was like, well,
Right.
actually, we can be in a much more agency driven, human agency driven position using technology and resources and planning and personality how you open. You are here. This is you. You're not delegating this to someone else.
Right.
You have the capacity to be ready for yourself or your institution or wherever else.
I don't know. As I was reading and as I'm thinking about all this stuff, I keep hearing "This is the end of the world as we know it" by REM. It keeps running
Ah,
through my head. So, but I
it
know you
can be
don't.
a lot. It can be a lot. I mean, right now, I think about look, honest, we're talking on July 17th. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal has a story. I know it's international, but it has this. I feel like it would have been longer. That likely that horrible crash that happened last month in India,
In India, where they
which
turned off the gas
yeah,
lines.
pilot murder suicide, right? I mean, it was,
Have
and
they concluded that? It seems obvious.
it seems obvious. The Wall Street Journal basically has had access to the black box where there is some interaction between the co-pilot and the pilot, which suggests the pilot knew what was happening. And so terrifying, right? It was like, okay, so but that like that's like that's like a blip, right?
Yeah.
And we're we're only a week away from the Texas flooding, a week plus away, and we're not talking about it that much.
Of course, we're on to the next one, which
Yeah,
leads me to my next question.
yeah.
Is it just me, or are these things happening more frequently, especially natural disasters? Are they happening more frequently, or is it because of cell phones and social
Yeah.
media, and we talk about it more? But if we look at this thing historically, is it happening more now
Yeah.
than it used to?
It's both, but on the statistical side, yes, I don't have the data in front of me, but if you measure disasters by $1 billion, even
Uh-huh.
taking into account inflation, we're at multiple billion-dollar disasters a year as compared to maybe one every 3 years in the last decade. And so you're seeing, but one is also the connectivity of how disasters unfold. So there's lots of secondary and third effects. You have consciousness of these disasters and in ways that we didn't have before. And so it's a sort of a combination of them all. But at least in climate disasters, the affirmative answer is yes.
Because
And
of
that's
climate.
why, right, and that's why the strains on the system, well before Trump and MAGA and Doge and all that stuff, the stresses on the system were apparent even before that. You saw it in California, you saw it with COVID.
Sure. I was interested to read a recent poll that said that only 17% of people thought that climate change will affect their home area.
Uh,
It's
Are they
it's
paying insurance? I
I'm
mean, it
sorry.
is.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean,
right,
it
exactly.
is. First of all, if you're in uh, and now I got to figure out Western North Carolina, you probably didn't think you'd be impacted by flooding or by
No.
a hurricane. It is, everyone's going to be impacted by heat. It's a
And migration. People are going to have to
migration.
move.
Yeah,
People are going
yeah,
to have to move to get
yeah.
away from it.
And the big public policy issues about this are, they're not going to be debated now in this administration, but they're going to come. And I write for The Atlantic. I had a big piece in The Atlantic on insurance.
Hmm.
And in the absence of public policy changes, those changes are going to uh, uh, be amplified or be guided by insurance, private sector, and not public accountability decision making. Because insurance companies will just say, as they have, we're out of here.
Right. We can't afford to do this. Let
We
me let
can't.
me let me turn to the Department of Homeland Security, something
Ah,
you're also an expert on. Um,
yeah. Unfortunately,
Look,
now.
I can't have this conversation with you today, especially without talking about the massive budget cuts at the department. Agencies like FEMA,
Yeah.
NOAA, the Weather Bureau, all of that.
Yeah.
What does this mean? People are listening to this.
Yeah.
What? So there's a disconnect in the world.
Yeah.
When you hear that there's waste and fraud and mismanagement, and we got to cut that out, everyone goes, yes, of
Yeah.
course, cut it out. But when you cut out billions of dollars to FEMA, if I'm listening to this at home and I hear this, most people are going to go, yeah, well, whatever. Tell them why it matters.
Yeah. So, and I'm so glad you're asking this now. And I just, uh, uh, to put some specificity on your question, because it's interesting. DHS, FEMA, cybersecurity, other agencies, infrastructure, have been really hurt by the budget cuts, but ICE has not. So you're looking at an
Well,
agent.
conversely, ICE has gone up,
Yeah,
I think,
it is a
$70
billions.
billion
It's
dollars.
the largest federal law enforcement agency now, bigger
Yes.
than FBI. So if you look at them, if you look at that piece of it, you're looking at an agency that only essentially has one agenda, which is not why the Department of Homeland Security was created. It was created to look at the risk to the United States. And the one agency, FEMA, which we mentioned, Trump before the floods in Texas had said he wanted to get rid of FEMA under some scheme that no one quite understood, and then now realizes that it's not politically feasible to do that, and so it has promised to keep FEMA. So one is just what the department looks like, but the second is just the overall question is, like, how do I was trying to figure out, how do I explain this and why it matters in my space, and I've decided that or the title of a piece I wrote for The Atlantic was, "You're going to miss us when we're gone." In other words, preparedness is not terribly efficient because you're getting ready and your hope is that nothing bad happens. And you only miss it and realize that the investment was worth it when something bad happens. Think about sirens, right? Oh, we don't need sirens, like whatever sirens, like, yeah, you need sirens, right?
Right. A lot of kids died because of
yeah,
that.
right. And so Doge, by focusing on efficiency, which we all buy into, of course, who doesn't want to be more efficient? We hate bloat, blah, 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 really manipulated the way we should be thinking about government, which in my mind is, governments exist to perform duties when their citizens need them to perform them successfully. And so you can't really look at the preparedness, National Weather Service, NOAA, DHS, FEMA, all of them, and say, well, this is efficient or not efficient. You've got to look at it as, is this a duty we owe to the American public? Because as Trump has discovered, the American public expects government to work when their lives are at stake. That is just clear. And I think he I am of the school, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm of the school, because I follow the polling on disasters. We all know that George W. Bush polling, he's much more popular now, polling plummeted not because of Iraq or Afghanistan, but because of Hurricane Katrina, right? Never got above 30% after that until he's long gone. People will excuse other things abroad. So that's the first. The second is that I think Trump would have had his second term as a big but for COVID. I mean, in other words, and he almost won, he didn't almost win, but
it was close.
It was close. It was close.
He did lose, but it was close.
Yeah, exactly. And so people expect government to work. And I think you're seeing some of the politics around that now with his changes on ICE and stuff.
You quoted the Wall Street Journal. I'm going to quote the New York Times 2 days ago. If I may read, cuts endanger U.S. response to calamities. In an effort to shrink the federal government, President Trump and congressional Republicans have taken steps at diluting the country's ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to catastrophic flooding and other extreme weather events, disaster experts say.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I literally wrote that 6 weeks ago. I was like, everyone get ready. This is, and he's backtracking on things with NWA, with National Weather Service and NOAA and FEMA. But yeah, we are not ready. We weren't, it wasn't like we were perfectly ready before, but the administration is now taking a hatchet to what you might call a preparedness effort. That involves many different pieces, and that isn't easily. It's not replaced by the private sector or local and state governments. And you could add HHS into this. Vaccine skepticism or vaccines are a form of preparedness.
Well, those two agencies kind of go hand in glove, I think, in a lot of ways. The president has said that he's not going to get rid of it, but then Secretary Noem said that they're going to change it from what it is. What's so bad? I don't understand what's so bad about it. Why has this become even a political issue?
It isn't. I think part of it is I started to look at the data that is just absolutely clear that Trump is delivering recovery resources through FEMA to red states and not blue. So we're starting to see some sort of distinction between the two, which we should anticipate and call it out. Like, don't pretend otherwise.
Well, that was my next question, actually. My next question.
He doesn't think it's broken. He thinks it's broken only when it applies to blue states.
Right. Look, he is what I was going to ask you. You brought up North Carolina. I was going to ask you to contrast the flooding in Western North Carolina with the flooding in Texas. As far as FEMA's response, he was extraordinarily critical and offensively critical of FEMA at a time when FEMA was trying to get water to people.
Water to people. But remember, he was pushing misinformation about what FEMA was doing. He was promoting the conspiracy theories and really endangering people. And I think that's just, that is. Put it different. I need to change my class, which I'm teaching this fall, because the normal sort of structure of government is locals respond, state coordinates, federal support, right? So you have the first responders, they're the local, the state comes in if they need more capacity to assist or get other states to assist. And then the federal government comes in to support all of those efforts, search and rescue teams, those were delayed in Texas, and recovery. And that's just different now. You have a president who's using these acute moments to play politics or to play partisanship in a way we hadn't seen before. I always say to people, get over it. All disasters are political because they're the fight for limited resources.
Sure.
Of course, it's going to be political. Who gets what, when, what order? That's not new to disaster management. Partisanship is.
Right. Well, you have to make choices in government as far as where the money goes.
Yeah.
I did check this out. 6 million people in California voted for Donald Trump for president. So they're getting hurt by this.
Yeah. Or think about North Carolina.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because yes, of course.
Much closer state. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the responsibility of elected officials.
Yeah.
So, people blame Biden if he didn't show up on day one of a flood or something. President Trump shows up when he wants. Kristi Noem shows up later. There's an acting FEMA director who was lost for a week. I mean, no one knew where he was.
I can't even name him.
I can. David Richardson.
Richardson.
What is the responsibility of these people? Is it a negative sometimes when they come? Like Biden said a few times, I would like to go, but this is not the time.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's, disasters have a response phase and then a recovery phase. No political beast should show up during the right response phase. And what drives me crazy is I'm on CNN and, they'll be like, there's a press conference and there's like the governor, lieutenant governor, the attorney general, 14 city council members, and you're like, this is not helping. We got to focus on recovery. But then, response. Then after that, I think it's appropriate. What I say is like, in these instances, this is when people need to know someone in charge has empathy. And if you can go and show empathy, then you go, right? And that's the question.
Because it helps?
It draws attention. It also helps them understand, sort of how it works. And it also, I think there is a role for politicians to be consolers if they know how. I mean, we have a bunch of politicians that, Gregory Abbott, governor of Texas, who basically is like, it's a sin to ask questions about our response. I'm like, actually it's a sin to let those girls die without learning why they died. That's the sin, right? So I'm not like on Trump, like, why wasn't he there yesterday? But the FEMA director is more interesting. This FEMA administrator, not qualified, didn't even know there was earlier, a couple months ago, there was a
hurricane.
He didn't know there was a hurricane season. And his absence is just like, this FEMA administrator should not be political. The FEMA administrator should be out and about in every disaster, as we've seen through Republican and Democratic administrations.
We have a few minutes left. Can I talk about terrorism? One of your early.
Yeah.
I'm always shocked that in 1999 and 2000, you were working on anti-terrorism 2 years before the rest of us were focused on it.
Yeah.
It makes one wonder who knew what when.
Yeah. Well, the magnitude of 9/11, I don't think, I wouldn't even pretend, because I wasn't in government at the time, that I could have envisioned that. But we were preparing for a catastrophic event, and in the report that we came out with on the National Commission on Terrorism, we urged more military planning in the event of a homeland attack, and we were killed. I mean, they were like, "You're going to send out the military." Now it's like, yeah, that's like sort of what we do in terms of domestic preparedness planning. But 5 minutes after the first attack, I knew what it was. I was not. I mean, that was, and certainly by the second. And I was doing interviews. I was I described this in one of my other books. I was doing interviews. I was on a train going into New York City. I was doing interviews where the first question is something like, what is Al Qaeda? Like, right? Like, I mean, this is
Right.
how no
Right.
one knew. Who is this man bin Laden we're hearing about? Um, and also, as I described in the book, we were so unprepared that I am sitting on an Amtrak going into New York City from Boston, and I'm the one who stands up and says everyone off because Amtrak had no protocols. I was like, and we ended up getting off in New Haven.
Well, this goes to a little bit about your consulting business real
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah,
What should schools, malls, churches, other facilities be doing now?
yeah.
To you can't stop it, but
No, no, you're going to minimize
how do we
minimize the harm.
minimize it? How do we catch more of it? What do we need to be doing?
Right. So I mean, and I do a lot of mega event planning now in
Right.
sports and make major sports events and stuff.
This is
And
through your consulting
yeah, through
business.
my consulting.
I am
So
solutions.
yes. So thank you. And so you're looking at safer. So always think about safer, not safe, because if you're trying to get to safe, you're paralyzed, right? Because these are intrinsically dangerous things. Will my kid be safe if they go to Boston Calling? No, right? Because your kid is leaving the house, right? Like,
Right.
it's but you can get safer. So there's a couple things that I look at, or if I were examining something. So one is, does the leadership have what we call situational awareness? In other words, when I think about my runway, are they ready for to understand what's happening in real time so that they can guide, say, concert goers. The second is I review and assess planning in terms of response capacity. So if you're thinking about a crowd, it's going to be, can you get them out quickly? Can you speak to them through loudspeakers? If you're talking about a school, do you hide? Do you run? How does that work out? So you want to look at the different plannings, and then you want to look at communication to stakeholders who would be engaged or who might be worried. One of the many horrible things about Uvalde is that parents no longer trust law enforcement. And so in school shootings, you now have to think about how are you communicating to parents, because parents are running in
Right. To protect their own children.
because they don't, I
Right.
mean, they don't want to hear that a cop is there now. So
How do we
that is,
deal with stuff? How do we deal with stuff like Boulder?
yeah,
I did read
yeah,
your piece on anti-Semitism in the Nation, which was
yeah,
really excellent, and I recommend that also. But how do we
yeah.
deal with something like that?
So, I mean, you mean the attack on which, I mean, now
The
I'm
attack
thinking,
in Boulder on the
oh,
people
yeah,
on the
I'm
people
sorry.
who were protesting about
You say Boulder, and I'm thinking the fires, or that, right,
no, Boulder,
the
Colorado, the
anti-Semitism.
guy
Yes,
with the flamethrower.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so this is it is hard, um, and you are not going to make every community perfectly safe, but for the Jewish community now, uh, better alignment with law enforcement, maybe some security, definitely planning for afterwards, right? In other words, are you getting people? One person ended up dying in that, so it did
Right.
have a fatality. And also, as a society, condemning anti-Semitism across the board, not just from the left, but also from the right.
I'm going to ask you two very quick questions.
Yeah,
I'm going to let you go because I know you have a busy schedule.
yeah, it's crazy today.
They're making a lot of changes at TSA.
Yes, that's
Keep
what I'm
shoot.
going on CNN about
Oh, good.
in 45 minutes, or no, in an hour and 40, an hour and 15
Okay.
minutes.
Well, we'll get you off. I know you have other things you have to get
No,
done.
so these changes are good. These changes are important.
Are they cosmetic? Were the requirements cosmetic? I mean, in
no,
Europe, they don't make you do
at the
this.
time they were, and then you get what's called, sort of the ratchet up conundrum, which is when you put a security feature in, it's very hard to ratchet down. So I applaud the Trump administration for taking advantage of the technology that other administrations invested in and saying enough is enough. I think both of these changes are a big deal. I will say one quick thing. The irony is, of course, no one's flying because of the economy, and no one internationally wants to come here. So as we're going to make airline flying easier, we are seeing a plummet in tourism.
But we'll be just as safe.
Yes.
Okay. Last question. You have three kids. What do you worry about the most? A natural disaster like LA, Texas, something
Yeah.
like that, an American te terrorist like Boulder, Colorado, or a foreign attack like 9/11. What should we be most concerned about?
For my kids, uh, it is uh, it is a violent domestic incident that, like, I feel like with weather, we sort of would have notice, like, I mean,
Hmm.
it'd be horrifying, but it would just be, they're just at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right,
I
right.
mean, and that would be my fear regardless, right?
Of course.
My biggest fear is that, you know, I don't, I have mundane fears like, why do I see their helmets at home when I know they have their bikes? Like, I was like, if you're not going to take your helmet, at least hide it. Don't be an idiot.
You're a mom. You
Yeah,
happen to be a
exactly.
disaster expert, but you happen
Exactly.
to be a mom
Yeah,
first.
yeah. I
So,
mean, I worry about high consequence risks, but I
yeah,
also see the data, and it's much more dangerous for them to be on their bikes without helmets. Put on
I
your
get.
helmets, kids. They won't watch this though. So as you know, as I told you earlier,
Well, other children will. Not mine
maybe.
either,
I know
but other
exactly.
children. Wonderful. Juliette Kayyem, disaster expert. Stay unconventional.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much to Juliette Kayyem for a very interesting conversation on a wide range of topics. Um, I don't know about you, but it makes me nervous with all the cuts. Waste and mismanagement needs to go. But we need people out there who are helping keep us safe, and funding needs to be appropriated appropriately. And so I hope people will take a good hard look at that. Look, we learned a lot today, and perhaps my biggest takeaway is that disasters are inevitable. We can't prevent them. However, we can do more, a lot more, in how we prepare for them and in how we lessen their destruction. While not perfect, while not perfect, it is a noble goal to try to protect lives and lessen destruction. We can also do more to support the dedicated men and women who work tirelessly to protect us, whether they are first responders, emergency management, or the folks who work for our government, who use their knowledge and expertise to make sure that all of us, that we're okay and we're protected. They don't deserve to be ridiculed. They don't deserve to be put down. And they surely don't deserve to have their jobs lost to serve some larger policy goal, which has nothing to do with the goal that they're trying to serve in their official capacities. They deserve our thanks and they deserve our respect. Anyway, thank you for listening to us today on Unconventional Times. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Remember to listen to us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And please don't forget to watch us on YouTube at UT-Richard Gordon. That's YouTube at the letter U, the letter T, dash Richard Gordon. And so for Unconventional Times, this is Richard Gordon. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.